Thank you, Chairman. If I could, just a brief opening question for both of you. For the record, do you oppose a full-year continuing resolution for the Army in FY26? Mr. Secretary?
I think the Army will operate under whatever constraints we are given.
Does it disadvantage the Army to have to operate under a full-year CR? General, does it disadvantage the Army to have to operate under a full-year CR?
Yes, I think we'd want a budget.
Thank you. I think so do all of us, but it's just helpful to have clarity on that. And I agree with the point just raised in the last question by the chairman that our partnership with Ukraine is absolutely critical. And I'll tell you from my last bipartisan trip, a CODEL with Senator Ricketts to Taiwan and the Philippines, our treaty ally and our partner are watching very closely whether our support for Ukraine is sustained in the face of aggression by Russia, and they will draw conclusions from whether or not we are a steadfast and reliable partner. Let me turn to my two core questions. I've had the tragic honor of attending many dignified transfers at Dover Air Force Base. General, I've seen you there as well. And I recall clearly 18 months ago, the transfer of the remains of the 3 Army reservists who were killed at Tower 22 in Jordan. They were killed by a very low-cost, low-tech, but lethal Iranian drone. We did not at that time have the counter-UAS systems to detect it, intercept it, and stop it. I went back to the region and met with a series of military leaders and was very concerned by what I heard about the lack of currently available, deployed, effective counter-UAS systems. And as I mentioned, given developments in the region, this is a heightened concern. General George, what does the fiscal year 26 budget request show that's going to address this dynamic and concisely help me understand how you're achieving through agile funding, the need, as you said, to buy capabilities rather than specific programs of record in this area where the technology is rapidly emerging. We have a great partner, the Silicon Valley of warfare right now. How does this budget request accelerate your capacity to deploy and defend our troops?
I think you're going to see, sir, that we're going to spend a lot more money specifically on counter-UAS. I would also tell you that spending the money on the drones helps as well, because there are cases where we have, I think a lot of what we're learning too is that drone on drone is a good, way to do counter UAS. So I think it's going to be a little bit of both. And that's a big part of what we want to do with the transformation initiative is make sure that we're spending, focused on those areas. I think everybody's going to have to deal with this across the joint force moving forward. Everyone is going to have to deal with countering drones. We are doing a lot with making sure that we are, not sending stuff to, White Sands or doing it other places. We're still using those areas, but also just sending things directly to the Middle East is, for an example, what we're doing with Transforming in Contact. We have a very large exercise that's going on right now. We'd love to come over and brief you at the when we get finished with it, called Flytrap, where we're doing this over in Europe, actually putting all the different sensors, making sure that we're lashed up as far as the data layer that the Secretary was talking about, and then kinetic and non-kinetic effectors. We have to get after the cost curve, and I think that that's what we're looking at. And there's many, and I could go down the list of directed energy, laser, kinetic, drone on drone, testing all of those EW systems that we are doing. And we need to scale it, I think is your point.
We do. And look, as I said in my opening comments and have communicated to both of you, I agree the Army must change and modernize how it fights and must take into account significant changes in technology. But bluntly, months after you've announced the Army Transformation Initiative, this committee hasn't received detailed or substantive analysis as to why the Army is planning to cancel or reduce 12 programs of record, consolidate or reduce staffing at 21 commands, or how the investments you're proposing will significantly enhance battlefield lethality. I am eager to work with you in good faith, just as this committee did with the Marine Corps, but we need your analysis to make informed decisions. Mr. Secretary, when will the Army be able to brief the Army Transformation Initiative in detail to this subcommittee so we can do our job?
Senator, we'd be happy to come by anytime, but I think very specifically you will have that detail within 10 days.
That would be welcome. Did you coordinate critical ATI decisions with other services before you announced the cancellation of joint programs?
Looking at ATI, and when we do the math, it's basically $48 billion in spending over 5 years that we don't think is relevant to the Army anymore. And the reason we don't is you talk to soldiers, there are instances where like the Army hadn't requested a Humvee in years, and yet we kept it getting
I hear
it
you.
every
My
year.
question was about consultation with other forces, other services.
I'm giving you a long-winded answer, Senator, to basically say the reason that change was so hard is because when that consultation occurs, what would happen is the antibodies in the system come up to stop change. And so when we weighted the decision of how do we actually get the most likely chance of succeeding, we decided that the best chance was to sync with the Pentagon leadership and the administration and keep it very narrow until after announcement. But we consulted with them the night before we announced it, and then very soon after it came out live.
You're well aware of examples like the Marine Corps being very surprised about the JLTV cancellation and there needing to be significant adjustments following that.
Absolutely, Senator. And we weighted the risks and the benefits and decided it was, we believed better to do it.
Can I just make one comment on that,
Please, Jim.
Senator? Only because, we always, across the joint staff and across the services, we're going to fight as a joint force. And we're looking at this, and, the Army warfighting concept is part of the joint warfighting concept. So I will tell you that everything that we did, that we took in mind, was about how our Army is going to operate within the joint force and looking around. So again, in my view, what we're not doing is impacting anything. I think we're going to be much more lethal to provide for the joint force. There might be one example of a system, but overall we are going to be much better prepared for the future.
I'm over time. A quick last question, General. Has the Army been directed by the Secretary of Defense to withdraw any Army echelon from Europe?
Not that I'm aware of.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for going over time.